North Carolina's population is bigger than ever. That makes the upcoming census more important than ever. From Jones Street Studio, we focus on Census 2020 next. North Carolina's population is growing, and it doesn't look like that's stopping anytime soon. There are 10.5 million people at least living in the Tar Heel State right now, and the census hopes to count every one of us. That's because a higher official state population will mean more federal funding for state and local governments and programs. It's believed $1.5 trillion federal dollars will be split between all 50 states based on 2020 census data. That money will not be evenly split. North Carolina's larger population will likely mean an additional U.S. House seat as other states lose population and lose their House representation. Billions in federal funding and a larger voice in Congress are what's at stake based on the 2020 census of North Carolina. Grant Goblin with the Rural Center, in City Council Stacey Carlis, and Bob Coates, who is the governor's liaison for the U.S. Census. Thanks for joining us very quickly. We'll start with you, Bob. What kind of job is this to canvass this state and count upwards of 10.5 to 10.6 million people?
It's a huge job. It's the largest peacetime mobilization the United States government does. And the task is coming down to thousands of people who have volunteered to be temporary census workers in the state of North Carolina. And those folks are going to be tasked with counting everyone in the state once, only once, and in the right place. That's everyone from the seniors to the youngest baby in the state. Everybody counts, and the task is really in our hands. So beginning in mid-March, questionnaires were mailed out, and for the first time, people can use the internet to respond to the census. But if after, say, the middle of May, you haven't responded, the census workers will begin going door to door with that traditional kind of knock on the door, get the responses from those addresses that didn't participate.
Big cities are out there. Most people in North Carolina are urban, but 80% of the counties are rural.
About 45% of the population is in rural areas. It's lower density, of course, than in urban areas. Many of them are economically challenged. A number of them are transitional counties in terms of population. So it's really critical to us that we get as accurate a count as possible so that we can tailor services accordingly.
Stacey, how do we know we've got an accurate count when Census 2020 is completed?
So the numbers will actually come back at the end of the year, December 31st, they will be reported to the president. And that's the opportunity that North Carolina will have the chance to look and see what the numbers actually look like versus what we believe our communities look like.
What do we believe our communities will look like?
We definitely expect it to be bigger, much more diverse. Looking at some of our larger foreign-born populations, as well as some of our minority populations.
We'll have the total state population figures on December 31st of this year, and that's when we'll find out if North Carolina gains another seat, or possibly two, in the House of Representatives. But our community data will come out the following April of 2021. So that's where we'll see the county populations and the municipal populations. But what we've noticed over time is that North Carolina has been growing very strongly for the past several decades. Right now we're growing by about a net 100,000 persons a year. And most of that's about the size of Wilmington. Every year we're growing. And a lot of that population, probably the bulk of that population, has been from in-migration. People moving from other states, they recognize what a good quality of life we've got in North Carolina, so they're moving in. And we're also getting some international migration as well.
Is rural North Carolina still growing, or is it shrinking in relation to the cities and an actual population?
Yes, it's growing from the standpoint of a lot of the coastal counties, counties that are somewhat near the urban areas, the rural counties that are near the urban areas, Sand Hills region, greater Asheville region in the west. A lot of that's driven by retirees. The immigrants, the in-migration from other states that Bob mentioned is driving a lot of that. So there are areas that are really booming. We also have a number of counties in which they're losing population. And a lot of that is due to economic challenge. We're constantly looking for solutions to that to try and stabilize those counties. So it's a real mixture, and it depends on where you are in the state. So the census is critical to us understanding how those transitions are taking place.
U.S. Census researchers looked back at the year 2015 and found that 132 programs used census data when deciding how to distribute federal funds among the U.S. states. over $675 billion every year was influenced by the census count during the 20-teens. That meant $312 billion healthcare dollars divided up based on population count. Nutritional benefits funding, Medicare Part B funding, and highway construction money were all influenced by the official census count of each U.S. state. So states that undercount their population will be underfunded because people who didn't get counted will still need medical care, will attend our schools and colleges, and will certainly use our highways and roads. If this state undercounts, Stacey, its population, does it really matter?
It's a lot of money at risk for North Carolina. So currently North Carolina receives about $23 billion a year. That's at least $1,600 per person that we're talking about over a 10-year period. And this funding funds programs such as healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, school lunch vouchers, affordable housing, our highway infrastructure program. So when you're driving along the road and you see that pothole, if you want it filled, you need to be counted so that our state has the funds to do that.
Grant, how does the population affect, the rural population affect the good things you see being built and being done in these rural counties?
Every single private industry that I know of, I mean, whether it's professional practices, retail, major industry, anyone that's looking at relocating or expansion, their questions are, who's there? How dense is the population? What's the composition of that population? So if you care about a Dollar General store on the corner or a Shell gas station or whomever it might be, the census count affects it. So it goes way beyond the government programs.
Is it the actual head count you think brings in business, or is it it's great now, we think it could be better in 5 years with more people, more education, more services?
It's a little bit of all of the above. So the head count lets you know who your service audience is, who's using the roads, the electricity, the schools, the infrastructure, who's using the Dollar General store or the Shell, or how big is the gap between grocery stores? Where do we need to expand into some food deserts? So all that information is baselined on census information, but also looking down the road. So knowing how many preschool-aged children get counted in this census tells us how many classrooms we need 5 years from now or 6 years from now. So missing children now means that we may not have enough teachers, but we might also have overcrowded classrooms 5 years from now. So it's really important that everyone at every age level be counted in the census, because all of this is really a snapshot of our communities, and the census is there to serve our communities.
Grant, is this a competition between urban counties and rural counties to get counted, or is it the state count is going to benefit everyone in the state regardless of where they live?
It affects everyone. I don't view it as a competition because so many of the services are styled accordingly. So I really don't think it as a competition, certainly from the rural county standpoint because of the lower density and due to the lead time that's required for building schools, community colleges, et cetera. All of these agencies are looking 3 to 10 years out in terms of what the population is likely to be so that they can have the services ready when they're needed.
Is the risk greater if you don't get counted than the benefit if you do?
I believe the risk is not greater if you don't get counted. We have everything to lose as a state, as well as just individuals, how we benefit from the services that flow from the funding, as well as just being counted and being politically empowered. So it's important to make sure that we receive every bit that we're entitled to.
If you do some searching, you will see that North Carolina could get a congressional seat, another U.S. House seat. How does that look from your perspective, having that you're there with the Counts Coalition? Is it looking good for North Carolina that we'll, I won't say steal a House seat, but we've earned one?
I believe we're going to get that House seat, absolutely.
The constitutional requirement for the census is specifically because the Founding Fathers knew that they wanted representation based on the people, on the residents of a community. So the census is done every 10 years to track where people are and then know that people move. So North Carolina gaining a seat would simply mean that in December of this year, we'll find out that yes, we did earn the seat, but where that district lies within the state will be the job of the General Assembly.
It's important to the rural areas because as those population shifts and as the district shifts, it's also going to affect our state representation. So it affects the power balance between rural and urban.
While the census is placing an effort to count every person in North Carolina, some groups say that will be a logistical challenge. One of those groups is the NC Counts Coalition. It says inadequate and late federal funding for the U.S. Census Bureau will affect customer service and result in reduced census communications. The group says door-to-door census canvassing is being reduced in favor of digital outreach. It also says the inclusion, then removal of a citizenship question on the 2020 census form sparked debate over whether it will influence undocumented people to avoid census participation. Who is the most difficult person to find when you're counting the population of North Carolina, Whitney?
Surprisingly enough, it's a child under age 5. So of any background, we know that kids under age 5 are the least likely to be counted of all the demographic groups in our state and in our country.
How can that be? We found the adults, we found older siblings, high schoolers and middle schoolers, the little kids. Do parents forget?
So what we know from the Census Bureau is that a lot of families respond to the census, count all of the other people who are living in a household, and are specifically leaving off that young child. And so they've done some focus group testing on this, and it doesn't look like they're forgetting the kid. A lot of people think that the Census Bureau doesn't care about kids under 5, that they don't have some sort of government footprint, that there's no reason for the government to want to count them, but we know that that is false, right? We want to count everybody.
In addition to young children, certain other populations are typically undercounted in the census. This could be Black African Americans, this could be the Latinx community, it's the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, all types of foreign-born populations, as well as transient populations who are moving from residence to residence, in addition to young children. And so the Census Bureau does try to work with different counties to form complete count committees where individuals who are a part of those communities can spread the message as trusted messengers about how important it is to be counted.
Why are so many groups not being counted?
For some, it's mistrust of government. Why are they in my house? Why are they asking me these questions? Why do they want to know how many children live here? As well as how is my information going to be used? Is it going to be used in a court of law? Is it going to be used for immigration purposes? What exactly are you asking me? Why are you asking? As well as it's just misinformation as well. If I'm not a citizen, am I really supposed to participate in the census? That's a very common misconception. Everyone participates. It includes every single individual alive on April 1st.
I think that people have very valid concerns, right, about, fear and mistrust of government that's based on a lot of things that have happened in the past and policy choices, right, that government makes. But we know that that's not really relevant to our census count. The Census Bureau is completely nonpartisan. The census itself is really just going and trying to get an accurate count of all of the residents of the country. It's not about, counting citizens. It's not about trying to enforce any sort of, laws or penalties. That information can't be shared with anyone outside of the Census Bureau, and there are really steep penalties and fines associated if it ever was, and there's no evidence of that ever actually happening in the past.
It's one thing to tell me it's a good idea. It's another thing to show me it's a good idea to participate in the census, you say.
All the messaging data and surveys that have been done on participation and why people don't participate, it shows that folks want to know, how is this going to benefit me? What is this going to do for me and my household and my family? So we talk about education, we talk about healthcare, we talk about transportation, things that affect your life day in and day out, and how that's going to impact you personally and individually, as well as your community.
The invitation's coming. Someone may come knock on the door. How should I act if I'm on the other side going, I don't know if I want to talk to you?
So I think that you should be ready to look for a census worker. First off, they won't come to your door unless you haven't responded to several efforts for them to contact you before then. So you'll either get a postcard in the mail that'll ask you to fill out the form online, or you'll get a paper form in the mail that you could have already sent in. You'll get about 4 or 5 touches before you actually get someone to your door. But if you do, make sure that you're looking for a census logo. They should be holding a messenger bag. They should have a watermark from the Census Bureau. You're definitely going to know that that person works for the census, and be willing to be honest with them. Your information isn't going to be shared. The census is really fast. It should only take about 10 minutes, and they really just want to make sure that your community is getting all the resources that it deserves, and the only way to do that is to get this accurate count. So, be willing to do your part, and don't worry about trusting them. The Census Bureau is safe.
The census has statistics on how we will be counted in the 2020 census. 95% of U.S. households will receive their Census 2020 invitation from a postal worker or a census worker. Almost 5% of households have their census invitation delivered to their home by a census worker. These are homes served by P.O. boxes or might have been affected by a recent natural disaster. And less than 1% of Americans must be counted in person by a census taker. These are people who live in very remote areas like northern Maine, parts of Alaska, and in a few Native American lands. Kelly McCullen back here in Jones Street Studio with Juliana Cabrales and Bob Coates, two people who know quite a bit about the census, but this segment's about misconceptions. Juliana, the immigrant community I would think, have lots of questions about those questions they'll be asked. What's legitimate, and then what is a misconception about the level of detail families are giving away?
Yeah, without a doubt, there's a lot of confusion among Latinos and immigrants community about what's going to be asked in the census questionnaire. We actually did a national survey last year that showed us that nearly half of the individuals we surveyed thought there was still a citizenship question on the questionnaire. We know that's not the case. So as we talk to community members, we're really focusing about what's on the questionnaire and what's not on it, so that folks feel confident about what they're filling out and including in their answers.
It's really 9 very basic questions. Information about the housing situation that you're in. Is it a house? Is it a townhome? Is it a trailer? Are you homeless? Are you owning and renting or renting? And then there's just questions about the age, race, sex, ethnicity. Are you Latino or not? And the age of everyone living here, and the household relationship. So are you married to anyone in the household? Are you the daughter or the son of anyone in the household? So those are the basic questions. There's no question on there about your income. There's no asking for donations. There's no asking for bank account numbers or any of that. None of those are on the census form.
How private can this process be?
So our messaging to the immigrant community right now is we'll start getting in the mail an invitation to participate in mid-March, and we really have until the end of April or early May to self-respond and avoid that enumerator coming to the home. We know that when we've talked to Latinos and the immigrant community, they tell us they really prefer to mail something in or complete it online versus having someone come to their door. So our message is participate early and avoid that enumerator visit.
So Bob, if you get the mailer, no matter who you are, you fill it out, no one will come to your door to try to do a head count on you personally. Is that correct?
That's right. Well, the easiest way to avoid an enumerator coming to your door is to complete the form. We have had folks ask if they can skip a question, and you can do that, but it makes it more likely that an enumerator will come to your door to ask follow-up questions.
That was a question I had. Juliana, are there questions that it's okay not to answer on the census form? And beyond I live here and this is who lives here, why answer all 9 questions?
So it's important to remember that the census is constitutionally mandated, so we're, by law, responsible to answer truthfully and thoroughly. And as Bob mentioned, what we've heard from the Census Bureau is the more questions you skip, the more likely someone will want to follow up in person.
Bob, how protected is this information? Because you would assume you're giving your information to the federal government. They would know anyway about you if they wanted to know bad enough, details of your family. But I'm told we're protected for 70 years, 72 years or some such.
Title 13 of the U.S. Code protects your individual information that you provide to the Census Bureau for 72 years. That's not shared with the IRS, with law enforcement, the courts, immigration. It's not shared with anyone for 72 years. And there are very severe penalties if anyone violates that confidentiality.
The Census 2020 effort is online. You can follow North Carolina's census efforts on Twitter by following @NCCensus. And if you tweet about the census, be sure to use #MakeNCCount to be heard. You can learn more about the federal census by visiting census.gov or read about North Carolina's in-state census work by visiting the website census.nc.gov. If you're in a group least likely to participate, the immigrant community, tell me about the family role in supporting each other as you get counted, because
If you're a family member that's watching this show, not only are you responsible for counting the people in your household, but how about you spread the word and make sure others, friends, family in your community gets counted as well.
how do the small children get counted?
Anybody who has contact with small kids, make sure that you talk to the folks around you. Make sure that you put it in your email blast out from your child care center. You're putting it up as a poster if you manage a grocery store. And if you're a parent or a grandparent or any other distant relative or anything like that who has a young child in your home, even if they were born on Census Day, April 1st, make sure you count them in the census and tell your neighbors.
If I'm in a homeowners association or a neighborhood social club and I do a newsletter, what should be in there to help people ensure that they're counted and ensure that they're not missed?
Well, the census is quick, easy, and safe. The NC Complete Count Commission and NC Counts Coalition have got great materials online, so visit the websites. The information is already there. You can just grab some drop-in articles, put those in your newsletter, share them with friends. There's even posters that you can download, have them in your window at your office.
Thank you so much for your participation. We've covered a lot of topics in this half-hour program. I thank you folks for watching this very special focus on Census 2020 from the Jones Street studio. Good night.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.